On the subject of media, what strikes us is that after all Ramayana, Mahabharat, hum log, passe. I guess you guys should see a clip of AIB, which I'll present recently. I'll pass on the link, which starts by articulating everything that's deep in our heart, saying that it's gone, it should be shut down. Have you seen it? But then he says, comes back at the end and says, oh my God, after the rural rollout of TRP, BARC data, these jokers are on the top. Well, he didn't get it right. We are not on the top, but we are not at the bottom either. But here I'm not standing in defense. Frankly, I don't mind if they shut it down also. But it's my duty to put forward certain viewpoints to you, and then you make your own decision. First of all, has it performed any useful function? Did it have any function other than be a government mouthpiece till about 97 officially and questionable thereafter? So from 1936, when All India Radio was set up, what has radio done? I can summarize it in a few words. Number one, India was a disparate, disaggregated set of conflicting and nationalities, ethnic groups, often at variance with each other and with very strong local pride. You're all sure you're Indians. We weren't so sure. We weren't so sure. In my state, I was brought up by saying, this is Bengali. We were called, the rest of North India was called Hindustani. Anybody who wore a pagri was called a Punjabi. And everybody down south was a Madrasi. Life is so easy. They speak gibberish, they eat gibberish, their language is such and such, and therefore we are. Now look, we have all gone past it and we realize that we are just one more state. This same thing applies to everyone that's come in from all different states, and we are very proud of the national identity. Now, it didn't come up just because we were there together. A bus load or a train load of persons who were traveling on a journey don't aggregate them into one sort of fused pride. The fact of being cohabitants, co-passengers in a journey does not bring about any emotional unity unless there's some attempt made on it. Now, I don't mean to say that the bureaucrats or the programmocrats had sort of thought it all out. Much of it is never thought out. It's just acted upon, and then you get what we call a reaction that flows. Okay. It all started with, let's say, the fusion or the emotional unity that would arise from Hindi films. Hindi films, technically, I'm getting now precise, were seen by less than 1% of India's population. Their songs, which were the binders, if I may put it, the emotional binders, were heard by another 1 to 1.5% via the gramophone. That was the only medium of relaying. And yet this 2 to 2.5% related a story that caught on. And the story begins at Colombo in 1952, by the year of my birth, with Radio Ceylon and Binaka Geetmala. Government of India's policy was nothing of Lada Lappa, no crass Hindi film songs, aap Shastriya Sangeet suniye. That sort of a thing. Whereas Hindi film songs, whether we understood the language or not, we used to beat. It was rhythmic. Apart from the rhythm, we needed a language, a vocabulary, and an idiom that rose above this Bengali, Madrasi, Punjabi, Marathi, Gujarati thing. And here was a common production that came in, which was a common effort, where the boom mic guy who was scratching this thing may have been from Bihar, the singer could have been a half Bong and a half Punjabi. Everything was a joint effort inadvertently made by the new republic. And that is why what came out was actually a cultural federal product. You had the Goan B-class Koli dance coming in with their jhatkas and stuff like that. You had the representation coming out. You had the sweetest of melodies that came out through Mother India. You had everything that came out. And this was, in my humble submission, packaged and spread all over India through the through the radio that began as a response to to Radio Binaka Geetmala, Radio Ceylon, Vivid Bharati. You can say Vivid Bharati didn't think of its act together. Vivid Bharati had a big minister who thought otherwise. But the once Vivid Bharati got its act together, the entire 60s and 70s will show to you that the amount of, as I use the word again and again, emotional unity that was strung in from different parts of India into one emotional, one sentimental group. Now, that is one of those advertent roles. And then came in, as Dr. Saab put it very beautifully, Hum Log, Bunyad, stuff like that, Mahabharat, when the whole India came to a halt. That brought in the second layer of each Indian understanding, but basically the problems are the same. They were the same then, they are the same now. We have issues then, we have issues now, and this is our common heritage. I'll stop here where the role of the public broadcaster is, because mine is not here to praise it, just to position it, and then leave it to your judgment. Now, why are we raising this topic at all? I'll give you the reason. Let's take a look at what a public broadcaster is meant to be. BBC spends this year, so I've got the expenditure for this year, 50,000 crores. Not a big amount. Don't worry, not a big amount. 50,000 crores, but Germany beat them this year with spending 52,000 crores. Followed by Japan, 40,000 crores. Now, on that score of how much the nation spends, well, India spends a magnificent sum of 4,000 crores. Out of which, government expenses come to something like 2,500, 2,400 crores, which is all gone to the fattening, for the survival of government worthies. I have told my government on more than one occasions that I am prepared to gift wrap them and send them back to you. If you just give me half that amount and let me hire professional journalists, professional people. They said, no, we hired them in good old days and you sort of look after them because poor guys are feeling orphaned. Now, we have some of the finest people among them. It's not that all of them, but that's about 10 to 15% who have updated them, who keep fighting, who have that spirit in them. Baki 85%, trust me, my CV was wrong. I have completed 41 years in public service, this service. And I can assure you, it's that traffic remains the same. Second is wait for the 7th pay commission that Mr. Jaitley has announced would be coming. So there are so many pressing occupations, then looking at Guddi, Mundi, stuff like that. Coming back to the expense part. Now, is expense a yardstick? For God's sake, no. Expense is not a yardstick. Expense is not a yardstick, but expense is a thing that you can have a decent look at, because then you know what are you able. Now, for instance, last year, year before last, we got a couple of good kids from NDTV. One was then this girl who comes in with the specs. She was from Times Now, etc. And the deal was simple. We look for good boys and girls, we hire them, and we bring them on at whatever they're getting, but 5,000, 10,000 plus. They agreed, 5 of them. And they ran 1 hour channel. It's called News Night. I'll just take a quick look and tell you what the last TRP is. We are number 1 by far, 9 to 10. That's the only time DD makes a serious attempt to speak in English. So 9 to 10, this period, we are about 4 to 6 times higher than Times Now. All of English news broadcasting, some of you are aspiring for that, enjoys a magnificent amount of viewership. It's 0.1% of India's viewership. 0.1%. So every time you see your mug in NDTV for that panel discussion, or you see yourself boxed into 8 or 10 while a Pakistani journalist is brought in to be humiliated at some amount of expense. I don't know how much he pays them and why they come. But every time you watch it, and that's why I refuse to, it's 0.1%. Now, again, coming back to my subject, why do you need a broadcaster? Well, if it does make serious attempts like the Newsnight Hour 9 and 10, it makes a jolly big difference. India's public funding is zook, except for the government officers and all that. The entire operations are run by us, on our wits, or whatever is left of it, on our own TRP, on our own advertisement. The government officers and cameramen and others who are there, I believe many of them have 3 shops, because you don't need to work in government. So this entire machinery is funded by government. And as I've made my views clear, not today, I made it clear when I joined, that you can take almost the entire lot back. I won't use the entire lot because there are very good people there. My own figuring is that from 2002, when the private sector opened up in TV, the best of the boys and girls left. Who's going to stay back in a... But now, look at the duties it has to perform. On TV, we have 67 studios. Given a choice, I would shut down some of them. But 67 have to be operated every day. On radio, you are now touching about 482, out of which originating stations are 320 or something. So do you need such a fantastically big setup now that the Indian unity has come in? Well, yes and no. I won't substitute my value judgment. Just one last word about public funding and all that. The per capita spending in Germany is 6,600, UK is 6,200, Japan is 3,500, Australia is 2,800. I hope these figures are getting somewhere. That is between 7,000 and 3,000, and India is 19 rupees. So before we take a judgmental call, have a look at this. Do you ramp it up? Do you give it a professional touch, or do you just shut it down? Because you got to take a call on this. I mean, you set it up, you said you're going to do this, and is this particular government or A particular government or B particular government responsible? No. All of them have been collectively controlled, or collectively influenced by something called the bureaucracy. I have been a part of it. I'm a bit of a crank member, dissident member, but I've been a part of it. So I know how their mind operates. And I know for certain that none of them would ever like to spare to release it. I had my issues with several governments, but at the end of the day, I don't hold that to be the prime factor. They were just fed in, and if they only had, well, everybody knows of my big problems with...
Mr. Manish Tiwari?
I didn't say it, somebody said it. So he was for 2.5 years. This is not a question of this government or that shade or green or yellow or saffron. It doesn't matter. It's there, but then you still get enlightened people there. And when I use the word enlightened, I have to mention 2 persons. One is I found Mr. Arun Jaitley at the end of my career to be a good minister. And I have to say, and in that government, I found Ambika Soni to be a very good minister. So there are these good people that come in, and there are people who try, but tenures are there, and there. What do you do with the courtiers? The courtiers are all there. I mean, the courtiers don't change. Now, we got to do something about that before we come to it. But before that, let me run you through what the world is thinking about. Canada, they set up a senatorial committee where they suggested 22 reform points, which means bring it down to size, yaram. First of all, Canada doesn't pay any big money for the public broadcaster. When I tried to get a pact with them, I found they were relatively small. Of course, they are 3 times bigger than us. We spend 2,400, they spend 9,000 crores. But that is purchasing power parity, everything taken into account. Canada, their thinly disguised attempt to contract the range of services. That's the term. Australia, very deep, we have a very interesting relation with the Australian broadcaster. And I saw these poor guys getting slaughtered by the government. And I felt so good about having Manish Tiwari around. So, so good because they had photographed a few boatloads of Indonesians rushing to Australia. And the government had sort of tipped off the boats, you know, the way people behave. Tipped the boats, did sorts of things, they photographed it and telecast it. So the government said, what the hell? These are supposed to be covered under the Official Secrets Act. How dare you show it? He said, look, I am a broadcaster first. I'll show you what I saw. And from that point of time, 4 years ago, the TIFF has been running. So whenever I want a cry, shoulder to cry, I ring them up and they ring me back, and we have this sort of thing going on, which means that it is challenged. So as I put it to Mr. Jaitley, the conflict is genetic. It's got nothing to do with persons. It's got nothing to do with Jawhar Sircar versus Jawhar Sircar, nothing. It's a genetic conflict. Britain, of course, they have launched down, and the current culture minister, who isn't very fond of culture, Whittingdale, has been saying that, oh, it's time we got it into right shape. So whatever that means. Yeah. So they have been trying to cut it down, and Parvez, you must be knowing about sorrow faces, but they still think they are ruling the world. That's a problem. They have this controversies going on, but the question has been raised by a forum called opendemocracy.net, where they say, well, you can go in for a voluntary subscription, but when you analyze the whole thing, you find that with a pro-industry attitude of every government, which could also mean a certain degree of coziness, that's perhaps may prove difficult in the long run. In India, we are getting the agglomeration of media under few specific heads. Okay? And you guys know what I'm talking about. One head getting together DNA, Z, their free dish service, dish service, dish TV, their cable operations, DN, whatever, city cable, so, and newspaper, and what have you. So, Big Brother is going to tell you sometime, like Rupert Murdoch, that this is a version of truth, and there ain't no other version. So, before we fall into that, or we have another group that's looking after, taken over CNN, they have taken over many other things, Inadu, this, that. So you are having this conglomerates coming up from behind. So what is your recipe against conglomerates? Do you have one? You may as well look at the trusted old sword to see whether you can put some Vaseline on the jung and see whether you can do something about it. So before an institution is thrown away, as I said, I am traumatized in the last few years working with the setup. But then, you know, this Rajput instincts come up, ki ladke dekhenge, chalenge. It can still, and as I saw it from TRPs and all that, oh, another one that just come in because these boys are, I have a couple of kids there, not kids, sorry, young men and women. This one is DD News. DD News is somehow at the top, followed by, what is it? Tej. Aaj Tak Tej. And then comes ABP News, then Z News, India TV, News 24, Aaj Tak, India News, News Nation. So this is what the viewership is like. When you make a sincere attempt through youngsters and all that, it works, that's all. Now, we were going into the public support. I'll just touch upon two more. One is about, what is the sum and substance? Well, one view is they are either commercial rivals who fear that they may not making as much money as they would be able to if it were not for the public broadcasters, or they are governments who want to have more control over whatever is being said. I leave the issue open. Now, we run over the purpose, finances, cultural unity and other special tasks that India had. Remember, Britain never had this special problem. They had only one nagging problem, and that's Scotland. And 1.5 nagging problems called Ireland. That's all. We had this problem of having 24 languages, 146 major dialects, We have 604 dialects put together. And just to give you an example what the public broadcaster does, whether it does it well or bad, is in Manipur, where the entire population is 30 lakhs, we broadcast the radio services in Manipuri in 6 major dialects and 33 minor dialects every day. Every day. So you have to keep the cultural federalism, cultural equilibrium of the place. There's the last niggling thing about ads. No public broadcaster has ads. The only one that has ads is India. The only one that has ads is India, and because it's got to survive. So somewhere down the lane, we goofed up. So let's get back to the drawing board and see, can you allow these guys to go in? I had this massive fight with ESPN once on, they treat you like ESPN and, no, not ESPN, this was Star, about sports rights. So they treat you like that. They took me to court. So the court said that no, Star has committed all these transgressions upon this. But in the interest of the nation, we would request the public broadcaster to please show it on the terrestrial channel. I said, my lord, I mean, I can show it, but he hasn't given me time to pick up ads. And every ad that I pick up, I have to pay him 75%. That's a rule. My lord said, look, we have appealed to your common sense and patriotism, to your national spirit. You go and sort it out. So Star said, EA. I said, okay, come back. I'll show you EA. We got back to the board and said, okay, from tonight, because we've got to show it from tomorrow morning, blast out on all channels. You want to see cricket ad-free? Watch DD. That's all. So everybody came in that way. After 7 days, they said, we're going bankrupt. I said, that's your problem. So if we had ad-free, I'm just giving that as an example, and you had some sort of spirited guys to fight it out. Last is about transparency and governance. There's a question as, again, I'm quoting my previous speaker, it all depends on who's heading it. I remember within a few days of my joining, few weeks of my joining, we had this thing going on chaos on Raisina Hill. And government had not yet understood the power of social media, so they were keeping watch on phones and this and that, but they didn't know that SMS and tweets could get so many young men. This was after the 16th December rape. Yes. I joined just after that. So they had occupied Raisina Hill, which no nationalist movement had ever occupied. Nobody had done it. So it didn't hit that Raisina Hill was under occupation, and I am about just a few feet away from Raisina Hill. I have that correspondence with me, very interesting, with the director of news saying, I'm telling him to go and cover it. He said, but sir, it is anti-national. I said, what do you mean? I mean, it's anti-government. I said, so? You're mixing up government and the nation. I said, are you a broadcaster? Do you have a good story? Sir, I fully understand, but I would require orders in writing. So I gave him orders in writing. We covered. I sent a spunky girl who actually started demonstrating with them until I had to tell her to shut up and be neutral. So we had, it all depends on transparency, and others would all depend on the spirit, and we got away with it. So with these words, I'll leave you guys a bit confused, a bit perplexed, but keep thinking, there ain't no final answer to any problem. We all pretend we know the final answer. The final answer lies within you, because the profession that you are going to take up, that is where you got to keep knocking all day. Remember, journalism is not above board the way we saw it coming. Stick to it. You will land up with a tiny little flat like me and an embarrassing bank balance, but you can say whatever you want and get away with it because you are not obliged to anyone. Thank you.